So today, we're going to look at how to paint ghost flames with water-based paints. Now just to clarify, there are tons of different ways to do ghost flames involving water-based paints, solvent-based paints, candies, pearls. There are lots of different ways to do it. Several things can be construed as ghost flames. So some people do them with candy paints, some do them with chameleon paints. I shouldn't even say that. Some people do them with all the different types. Today we're going to look at the method that I used with pearlescent paints. This is going to be very similar to what I showed you guys in the how to paint ghost flames with spray cans video. The only difference is that this has been done by other people, whereas the spray can thing, I feel like I'm the first person ever to be silly enough to try that. Anyway, as is always the case, we're going to get a much better result with this equipment than we would with spray cans, because this stuff's better. So what I'm going to be using today, well hell, why don't I show you what I'm going to be using today. So, the things you will need shopping list here is going to begin with a paint gun. I'm using a very small paint gun. This is a 1mm nozzle. It's just a touch-up gun. And this particular model is a Devilbiss starting line. Not that that makes any difference. You're also going to want an airbrush. This will be very difficult if you don't have one. The exception being if you're doing this on a very large scale and you're really good with your touch-up gun, then you can just use that. I'm going to be using a gravity-fed Iwata Neo, mostly because they're really easy to access, they're inexpensive, and it's something that I think that a lot of you guys might actually have. So as I said, I'm going to be using water-based paints for this. Now these are a good choice for, well, pretty much anybody, but particularly for hobbyists and stuff, because you don't need a whole lot of really fancy ventilation, you don't need a paint booth necessarily to spray them. You don't need to pay attention to flash off times, you just need to let the paint dry before you recoat it. It's fairly easy to work with. So that's what we're going to be using for this video. In particular, I'm going to use the Auto Air brand. I know you guys probably know that I use that a lot because it's easy for me to access and it's very good stuff. Also, Wicked is good, Createx is okay, which is funny because they make Wicked and Auto Air. Pretty much any water-based acrylic, these techniques are going to work just fine for you. So specifically, I'm going to be using pearlescent black to do these ghost flames. So you're going to need to start with a sealer on pretty much anything that you're painting with this stuff. For pearl black, obviously, I'm using the dark or black sealer. The old one is the dark, that's what I've got here. And the new products that they came out with fairly recently, they have a black sealer, which is what I'm going to be using from now on because this bottle's empty. You'll also need your pearlized black and the appropriate reducer for it. Ideally, you're also going to want some transparent base. This isn't completely necessary. You can get away with thinning down your pearlescent paint a little more and applying it lightly, but what the transparent base is going to do is make it easier for me to spray it because it'll add the volume that I need, but make the paint more transparent for our final coat. You'll see why this is a benefit when we actually get around to doing this, which is pretty much right away here. Some form of white, not the sealer, but one that's easy to use in an airbrush. I'm going to use the Autoborn because I can thin it down more easily and further than I would with the standard transparent. It's kind of hard to tell the difference. I just have a tendency to use the Autoborn because Auto Air tells me it's better, I guess. And obviously you're going to need some kind of clear coat. I'm not going to be clear coating this piece in this video. I'm going to save that for a separate video where I show how I like to clear coat with spray cans. And that'll be coming out sometime. Anyway, this video is not meant to be a plug for that one. So with that being said, let's get started. Alright, so I've gone ahead and loaded my gun up with some pearl black. Yeah. And I'm about to spray this panel. Now, I'll be spraying pearl black again at the end, so it's not super important that these first few coats are perfect. I'm just going to give it probably 2, and then the couple or the 2 or 3 that I do at the end will finish it off essentially. Now, just be on notice here, I'm a little worried that this isn't going to work out too well because it's the holidays right now and the boss has turned off the heat in here and it's really cold. Like I should probably be wearing a jacket. My hands are kind of freezing, so don't paint when it's really cold. If I were doing this for a customer, I would be doing it in a different part of the building, or I would turn the heat on and just pay for the difference or something. In this particular instance, this is just a demonstration, I believe, so I'm just going to do it. With that in mind, let's get started. Alright, so you probably noticed I did that pretty quickly. I was moving the gun relatively fast and I didn't put a whole lot of paint on at once. And I just did my 2 coats. Like I said, I don't need a whole lot of it on here yet because I'm going to be putting some more on after. Now, that spraying technique, moving quickly like that and putting not a whole lot of paint on, is kind of specific to these water-based paints. So if you're doing this with solvent-based paints, that's not how you're going to want to do it. You're going to want to get proper flow and make sure that you're not moving that fast. So it's probably pretty hard to tell on that camera. I need to get a better one of those one of these days. Anyway, there's the pearl black background. It's got some decent sparkle. It's kind of tough to see in these lights because they're fluorescent, but oh well, what can you do? And now it's time to put our image on there. So we're going to do that in the white using the airbrush. Obviously this isn't reserved to flames. If you're doing flames, you might want to have a freehand shield available. I'm not really sure what I'm going to put on there. It's going to involve flames. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to airbrush anything, so let's get started. You want to make sure that you're getting some reasonable contrast in here because you're really going to tone this back when you come in later with your color over top. You could actually do this straight on the black and do a black and white image and then go over with your pearl after. You just need a little more of it at the end. So you don't actually have to start with the pearl. But particularly for normal flames, this is the easiest way to do it. If you're doing something like I'm doing here, which is a little more complicated, then consider the other option. So a little bit of detail here and there is good. Obviously, things look cool when you put detail in them. But keep in mind, when you go over this again with your pearl or whatever you happen to be using, probably a pearl if you're following this video, a lot of that detail is going to disappear. You're going to tone it back quite a bit. So it's important to have contrast, for one thing. And also, I wouldn't waste hours and hours putting a ton of detail into this because a lot of that's going to disappear. there we have our little flame image thing. If you're doing this on something other than a piece of scrap sheet metal, you might want to dedicate a little more time to it than I just did. You're going to want to dedicate more time to it than I just did. But anyway, that's what we were looking for. A nice high contrast image, something involving flames. So there you kind of saw how I did flames. You'll notice that, or you will have noticed hopefully, that I very seldom use the freehand shield. Don't use an actual stencil at all. I occasionally use the freehand shield to put in a hard line, but very rarely. Flames, if you look at a picture of them, they do have some bright spots and some hard lines and whatnot. But this was never really designed to be realistic, for one thing, because ghost flames aren't realistic. And also, flames in realistic paintings and images are kind of natural and don't really have a consistent look to them. So I find it better to do them mostly freehand. I don't know why I keep doing this hand signal thing. I guess I'm just weird. So now it's time to go over this with the pearlescent paint, or pearlized paint, and kind of tone it back and give it that ghost look. So the objective here is that from many angles, all you're going to see is the pearl black, but when you look at it straight on or from certain angles, you'll see this image coming through it. This effect also looks really neat when you do a color shifting paint with it. I've done it before with AutoAir's Sparklescent paint, which has a highlight interference in it, so it changes depending on what angle you're looking at it from, and it looked really cool. If you want to see it, probably the best place to do so is on my How to Paint Ghost Flames with Spray Cans video right at the end. It's there. Or on my polish comparison video. I've kind of wrecked it now, the test piece that I did that had that effect, because I tried to polish different sections of it with different polish for that other video to show how they worked with each other. But anyway, not the point. It looks cool with color change stuff. We're just going to be doing it with standard pearl black. So ideally, we want a fairly low opacity coat here. Not very low opacity. We don't want to be able to see this through at any just from anywhere. But obviously we don't want full opaque coverage, or all of this will have been for nothing. So that's why I'm now going to mix my paint in with about 60% pearl black and about 30% transparent base. So here's my AutoAir transparent base, which I showed you earlier. Going to be about 30% that. And you may be thinking, Brad, your math is horrible, that only adds up to 90, but the remaining 10% is going to be reducer, because I want this to go on reasonably thin, and the reducer is going to make it flow better. You should be using about 10% reducer when you're doing water-based paints. Not for airbrushing. You can obviously use more reducer when you're airbrushing. Alright, so I've mixed up some paint in here, as per the formula that I gave you. And I'm going to go ahead and spray this now. I'll give you a slightly better angle with the camera, and we'll see what we come up with. So as I'm sure you can tell from that first coat, it's going to take several to do this. You could probably get away with not using quite as much of the transparent base as I did. The last time I did this, it was with a paint that had slightly more opacity, obviously. But this is going to work just fine. It's just going to take me a couple extra coats, which is okay, because with this stuff, I can do my coats about a minute apart. I'm going to just quickly put the heat gun on this, and it'll be ready to go for another one. And in no time, we'll have our finished product. So that image is starting to push back nicely. This is after 2 coats now. When we get to the end, I'll move it around a little bit so you can see what it looks like from different angles. The black is a difficult, I should have mentioned this before, the pearl black is a difficult color to do this with. Typically, an actual color like a pearl blue, or like I said, a highlight interference, pearl green, something like that, is going to be easier for you to work with for the ghost flame job. But why not do it with something difficult, and then when you go to try it with something easier, it'll be easier. Alright guys, so there we go. Here we have our nice subtle ghost effect. From a lot of angles you're not going to be able to see this at all. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to be able to make this work in the camera, but let's give it a try. So straight on, pretty much nothing. Down below, no, come on. From the side you can kind of see it. I'll see if I can get you guys a better angle, but it's fairly subtle, because we did it in black and because it doesn't have clear coat on it yet. The clear coat will increase the contrast. Like I said, I'll be doing that in a separate video about how to clear coat with spray cans. And using a color, a different color like I mentioned earlier to make it easier, will also increase the contrast somewhat. It'll make it easier to see. So if you're going to do it with black, expect it to be very subtle. So, I hope you guys found this video useful or interesting, or at least capable of alleviating some of your boredom. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked it. That way Google will put it higher in the search results and other people can find it more easily. And if you're not sick of looking at my face, feel free to subscribe. And by feel free, I mean please do. I come out with stuff like this fairly frequently, and I don't know, you might find some of it useful. So, as always, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Have a good one.